Shots in the Dark contains graphic depictions of events that may not be suitable for all listeners. We encourage all of our listeners to be open-minded and engage in dialogue with us through any of our social media accounts or email.
When life gives you knee lemons, you befriend the Baba Wolf.
This is the bachelor party, girl.
No, babe.
Welcome to Shots in the Dark. I'm Ty.
I'm Whitney.
And we're going to do something special today.
We're releasing a bonus episode this week because we've been talking about this since Ty started trying to force me into doing this podcast with him.
It was pretty aggressive.
And how we wanted to have this as its own episode because it is so important to both of us, but so important to me that I have lost math skills in order to retain information about this place for the last 15 years, just already in my head. Who needs math when you could have useless pieces of information about the history of a place?
So the format for this episode today, it's not going to be our typical start out with true crime and then end with something paranormal. We're going full paranormal today.
Right. And in addition to that, we want to, when we do get people sending us their stories, to do what we would like to call campfire tales. Because obviously when you sit around in a campfire, all you want to do is, you know, have a chat with your friend about some weird stuff that maybe happened to you.
Every night for us.
That's true. That is really weird. With us telling this campfire tale this week, like I said, we wanted to release it as a bonus episode so that we could spend a little bit more time on it. And when this comes out, it will be the 13th episode, which is, and I don't care how this sounds, is my favorite number, and it's one of my favorite places in the whole wide world, so I wanted it to be our 13th episode.
13 is my favorite number, and that was not planned. It just is.
Yeah.
I'm also a 13 baby. Born on the 13th. I don't know.
Was not.
It's my lucky number. I like it.
We're still going to take a shot, so if you'd like to cheers with us on this bonus episode, then feel free. Obviously, we don't care what you cheers with as long as it's not water.
Cheers.
Cheers. All right, so you ready to hear about my favorite place?
I know what you're going to talk about, but you're going to
know.
tell me everything that I don't know about this place.
I know. It's Bachelor's Grove in Midlothian, Illinois. It is, and I mean this seriously, it is truly one of my favorite places.
And I know that this gets said about a lot of places, but it gets talked about a whole lot as being one of the most haunted locations in Illinois.
Yeah, and actually it's one of the highest rating cemeteries that has hauntings in it in the entirety of the U.S. as well. It's one of the most haunted cemeteries, period. A lot of people don't feel as though they get a ton of EVPs here, but a lot of full-figured apparitions. So it's located in a small 1-acre plot of land across from Rubio Woods. It is a small, overgrown entrance that's completely roped off with a sign that reads "Closed" drawn between 2 wooden posts.
Also, did you notice that the closed sign is gone?
No, it's there.
Well, when I went with Kathleen the other day, it wasn't there, and we both had commented on it.
That's weird. I was there.
We were standing in front of the rope, and I was like, did you notice the closed sign is gone? Because I took a real close-up photo of it. Maybe it got torn off or something, and they had to replace it.
It's really weird, because it didn't look new or anything, because we went on Thursday.
Yeah, well, I texted you the day that we were there, but we literally stopped in front of it and had a conversation about how it was missing.
That's weird. Maybe it's missing, but it was there less than a week ago when I was last there. This is the thing that I kind of realized, because if you don't know the area and you don't know how to get in there, sometimes the GPS will go to Bachelor's Grove Woods, which is about a half mile up the street.
I don't even remember how I would have found it the first time that I went, because I'm pretty sure the first time I went there was with 2 other people that had also never been there.
You probably would have had access to some sort of internet search in order to figure out what Bachelor's is or know someone that had gone there.
Yeah, that is true. And it has been such a long time. I'm sure somebody probably just told us to park across the street in
at
the
Rubio,
Forest Preserve. Yeah.
A foot-worn path leads around and to the gravel and stone remnants of the old Lover's Lane and Road that lead to one of Chicagoland's most infamous cemeteries and haunted locations. The path isn't that long, but some claim that it seems to stretch a long way, weaving through the trees until the small fenced cemetery comes into view. So that's one of the things that I've heard a lot from different people friends of mine or people that I've talked to about this, as well as online, is when they walk past the close sign, that they start to notice that it seems like it stretches a longer way. But we'll get into why that might be a thing later. The earliest known information of the land reaches back to a census document from the 1820s, when the property was settled by a collaboration of, quote, Yankees, of English, Irish, and Scottish residents. Almost all of them came from New York, Connecticut, and Vermont. By the 1840s, German settlers had come and were the ones that mainly populated the area at those times.
Is it true that it was called Bachelor's Grove because they were primarily men?
So I'm going to get into that in a second, because there's a lot of misconceptions about this. A lot of German settlers were drawn to this area, and the name Everdeen became associated with the land put aside to form a small cemetery due to Samuel Everdeen settling some of his property to Frederick Schmidt. By 1833 or 4, they're not 100% sure exactly which year out of the two, the name Batchelder of the Batchelder family that had also settled there was given to the area and identified the area on census records and a couple different other things. Where the Bachelor thing came from, it's often thought that due to a legend, it was named for the large amounts of bachelors that resided in the area, and that was specifically because in 1933 or 4, a man named Stephen H. Rexford had claimed that 4 single men were living on the grounds. And so a lot of people think that because he says this openly and there is a record of it, it was named for those 4 men that were bachelors. And a lot of people think that the first people that were buried in that cemetery were specifically and solely men. But the first person that was interred at Bachelor's Grove was actually a woman.
Oh, I'm also not really super surprised by that, because a lot of the stories that I've heard about the people who have either died there or were buried there, a lot of them are women.
No, it's like 50-50.
Oh, well, no, I wasn't saying that that's all of them. I was saying that's the ones that I've heard about.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
The thing about the cemetery, too, before anyone starts going and expecting a major expanse,
right,
is that it is really small. There's actually only 84 plots that were originally placed in this area, and they never actually reached capacity, and especially now where a lot of the bodies obviously went missing. The first woman that was buried and the first person that was buried there was Eliza Scott. It has, every time it refers to her, she was Miss Leonard H. Scott, and she was buried in 1844. The thing about the cemetery in general, it was actually during this time period, because it was essentially a park site, they would take their kids there, they would pack a picnic, and they'd sit amongst the tombstones, and the kids would go swim in the quarry pond, which anyone that has seen it anytime recently is always horrifying.
I'm making a horrified face right now.
It's not a good picture, but the way it's described is that there wasn't about a pound of scum on the top of it. It wasn't full of dead leaves. It was just like a regular quarry pond, which I swam in quarry ponds when I was little, and they were also not gross looking like this one was. So a lot of people used to picnic there, and this happened still throughout the 60s. Not that people swam, just that they would often go and visit relatives, because even though it had started acquiring bodies in the 1800s, the last burial was actually in 1989. It was Robert E. Shields, which you would recognize Shields because you've been there. It's one of the last remaining tombstones that you can still see a name on. There are a few of them, but it's one of the larger ones in the cemetery.
1989?
1989.
That's way more recent than I had realized.
Yeah. He was actually cremated and buried in the family plot, but before that, one of the last burials was Laura M. McGee, and that was in 1965.
Oh. Big gap.
Yeah.
There. Why was he buried there? It was a family plot?
Because it was a family plot. So my assumption is that they probably willed down a plot space for him.
And did they bury his ashes then? Is that what?
Yeah.
Okay.
You can get cremated and your ashes buried. My grandfather definitely was, and so was my Uncle Morris. The last caretaker was Clarence Fulton.
Oh, of the Fultons?
As far as I'm aware, he had no relation to them. I actually looked up almost all of their heritage again because I had forgotten some of their names, and I felt bad.
Just like a coincidence?
I think it may have been coincidence. If anyone has any information on that, I would like to know it. So there was a lot of vandalism that was happening during the 60s and 70s and 80s and 90s and early 2000s.
As early as the 60s?
Yep.
Oh.
Because in the 60s, there was a road that was really close to there that had gotten closed. So it became more isolated. And when it became more isolated, that means that people would go into the cemetery and drink and vandalize the stones. They'd use the pathway as a lover's lane and park their cars, which is another reason that the closed sign is drawn across it, but you can still walk around it. And it is still okay to go to this location in the day.
Yes. I wanted to say that. Mm-hmm. You can totally visit this place.
Yeah.
You won't get in trouble. Lots of people go in and out of it.
Just don't go at night. I would strongly suggest that if anyone wants to go to there, I would strongly suggest that you do it during the week if you can, or on off-season days, obviously, when it's colder.
Beautiful in the fall.
Yeah. But in the fall, obviously, Halloween starts coming and everyone wants to go in there. So then you're there with people that are throwing things at the stones, which is
I'm thinking like late
hateful.
September or early November.
Yeah. Anytime really outside of October is probably a good call, especially if it's during the week.
Just don't go at night because you will get a ticket or trespassing.
Especially during October.
I don't mean to backtrack a little bit, but I have been curious because now we're moving into more modern days.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember how you were saying that way back in the day, kids used to go swimming in that lagoon that's there?
Yeah, the quarry pond.
The quarry pond, yes. Mm-hmm. I had always heard that was a place where Capone used to dump bodies back in the day. Is that a myth?
So the thing about that is that it's a situation where I would use allegedly. There's never been proof that actually happened, and they have actually dragged the quarry pond.
Dredged it?
Yes. They've gone through and actually tried to find remnants of other items. I haven't ever found enough information that says that actually happened.
They've never removed any bodies from it?
They've removed bodies, but they've been ones that have been exhumed because of the idiots that were going there and vandalizing.
Oh my god.
Yeah, but it's not been a lot of different bodies. It's just been some skeletal remains.
And you just talking about how starting in the 60s and moving onward from there, it became a site where people were vandalizing rampantly.
Yes.
I think that's a huge part of the reason that there's so much activity there.
That's one of the most widely held theories because a lot of the activity started around the 70s, 80s, where people were already using it as a lover's lane. They were already vandalizing. And a lot of people even were in the 70s, 80s, and 90s grabbing items from graves and throwing them into the quarry pond for funsies, or bringing them back to the natural circle that's in the back of the woods.
Is it true that when people would go there and dig up some of the bodies that there were also rituals involved?
It's reported that happened. I believe it happened because in the 90s and late 80s, obviously satanic panic became a thing.
Yeah.
In those particular time periods, a lot of people that were seeing this stuff on the news weren't subscribing to the actual satanic Bible as much as they were just doing what was being over-dramatized on the news.
Sensationalized.
Sensationalized is great. Yeah, that's totally the right word for what's happening.
And it became a bit of a double-edged sword how much they would talk about it. Mm-hmm. In a way, they almost spread it more and made this more popular during the satanic panic rather than they did actually warn and scare people. If you desecrate a grave, not good, bro. I heard that throughout France way, way, way back in the day, they used to actually sometimes bury people alive, one unfortunate soul from villages, in the cemetery because they would not be happy in the afterlife and they would be restless, but the purpose for that was that they would become the boogeyman that watched over the cemetery and protected the other graves.
Wretched, and I haven't heard that before. The activity started picking up pretty heavily after people were going in there and vandalizing and going in there and drinking and then going in there and performing rituals, digging up bodies, disturbing generally everything. Actually, a lot of the gravestones that were easy enough to pick up were thrown into the quarry pond or taken as souvenirs. That's why the Fulton Monument, it's the largest monument in there. It's one that's the most famous. because it is so large and because it has several people interred under it, obviously, as it being
a family plot.
Yes. So you can't move the stone, but the smaller stones that were originally around it, like Emma's stone.
Emma's stone, it's the one that reads infant daughter.
It's the one that currently reads infant daughter. It's been one of the only stones that is